It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show.
You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania.
I couldn't resist, John. I haven't played some drops in a while.
Hey, you know, an election result that you glossed over, Brad, that I'm surprised you're not spiking this football. Are you ready?
Go ahead.
Proposition ECC in Franklin County. What happened to that?
What happened? Tell me.
It was voted down.
Really? They advertised on this very
now,
station.
Brad, remind me, who did Proposition ECC by radio with?
Right here in West on Westplex Talk, right here in 104.5 KSOQ. They bought, and you know, can I tell you something? And this is interesting. And I didn't know this at the time, okay? And sometimes when I'm dealing with political candidates, and here's a perfect example. You complimented me yesterday on the ads we've got running for Stay Cool climate control out in O'Fallon.
Yeah,
okay?
they were awesome. They're so good, Brad.
Okay. Here's a guy, and I'm going to mention his name because his name was on the ad, Ted Swoboda, who was a guy who was a campaign. They formed a political action committee, whatever you want to call it, a campaign committee to vote down ECC, the tax increase for ECC. I did not know this, and this is a perfect example of how government works and how it doesn't necessarily work for the taxpayer. He sent me, and he didn't have a script, and I said, what do you want? Do you have an ad to run? He says, I don't have anything. And he sent me some information. I wrote the ad. And what was interesting was the background information was this was a tax, a property tax, both personal and real estate tax in the parts of ECC, the area of the East Central Community College District, which is interesting because it's not just Franklin County, if you know this or not, John, but the ECC district extends into southern St. Charles County and southern Warren County.
I did not know that at all. That's interesting.
Which is interesting because of the fact that I guess that was set up years ago that they essentially said, okay, here's the ECC campus in Union. We're going to draw a radius around the campus, and this is all going to be the ECC district. So St. Charles County voters as well as southern Warren County voters, and obviously the voters in northern Franklin County, northeastern Franklin County voted for this. Okay, this was a tax that was put on in 2005, and the idea was it sunsetted after 20 years. So in other words, the tax has been assessed on the taxpayers in the ECC district for 20 years, and according to what he sent me, it was very vehemently put out in 20 years ago that when in the year 2025, this tax will no longer be in effect, and it was to build a couple buildings on the ECC campus. Well, guess what? They're getting this tax money every year for the past 20 years. They don't want it to go away, so they put this on the ballot to essentially put the tax in perpetuity. So in other words, it would never go away. It would always be a tax. And if you listen to the ads, he said that on the average, I think it was like $2.5 million a year they collected from taxpayers. Okay? So here's an example of the government saying, yeah, we're going to do this for 20 years, and we promise after 20 years it'll go away. And then they're saying, well, on second thought, it's year 20. We don't want this to go away. And quite honestly, there were a lot of people in Franklin County specifically who were upset about this because they're going like, you guys told us this was going to sunset in 2025. Now you're trying to say, we still need the money. And they did a pretty good campaign. Matter of fact, I was just in Washmo over the weekend. A lot of signs, vote no in ECC, and a lot of grassroots.
Wait, now, what do you mean? What do you mean signs, Brad? Do you mean you noticed yard signs?
Well, John, I notice yard signs all the time.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't see too well, Brad. Is that Tom Smith over there talking?
But the difference is they bought radio, and he bought, and quite honestly, a pretty decent campaign. I mean, it wasn't like they threw me $100 or anything like that. And if you matter of fact, and I will tell you this, I'm not going to tell you the exact number, but if you go onto the FCC website, in full disclosure, we have to file all that stuff on the FCC website. You can see the entire thing. I filed all the paperwork there. You can see he signed off. You can see all that stuff. It's on the FCC website. If to give you an idea, I'm not going to hide this. This is totally transparent. Just go into your browser and type in FCC public inspection file, and you will find the website for the FCC, and you just type in the station KSLQ FM, and you will find you go into the elections, you got to go a bunch of different submenus, elections, and then 2025, and then local elections, and blah blah blah. And there, I think I've actually put a folder in there as far whatever their campaign was, Citizens Against Tax Increases or whatever it was. But see, once again, they bought radio. And it worked
Once
very
again,
well.
and Brad, I can say from experience that when you go looking for the public inspection website, make sure you put the L in public. Because if you don't, you're going to get taken to a whole host of other websites.
It's like, remember the old, I think it's gone now, but remember whitehouse.com was a porn site? Remember that?
Yeah, allegedly, Brad. I don't know where you're going. Brad, you know who in the if you could indulge me for a minute, you know who in the radio industry you never take, I won't say shots at, because then you'll go into your whole spiel again. But who's the little old lady that does a radio show in Washmo or Augusta? She does like a morning show. What's her name?
Diane Jones.
Diane Jones. Okay. I mean, you've criticized her before, but because there's for little things, but you don't talk about her much. And when you mentioned the ECC campaign, I figured that, folks might do stuff on there, but she does a typical guest show, I think. I know Ann Wagner's been on there before, but does she still do a morning show?
Yeah, she does. And what she has this is sort of infamous in that area. She has a grid that she has all the important people, and she loves rubbing elbows with all the important people. She has a grid set up so that I'm just making stuff up. I don't know if this is true or not. It could be. The mayor of Washington comes in on the first Tuesday of the month at 9 o'clock, and the mayor of Union comes in on the first Wednesday of the month at 10 o'clock, and the president of the board of aldermen for Union comes in on Thursday at 8 o'clock, the third Thursday.
I get it. We get it.
That's the way she does it. So everybody has their day, and she absolutely positively hates me, and I don't know why, to the point where I've complimented her in public. She does a very good job. She does a nice job. She's very much into politics. She's very conservative, and she, for whatever reason, she absolutely positively hates me. One day, I can give you a perfect example, and you think I'm making this stuff up. Before I get kicked out of the Washington Town and Country Fair, we would set up right next to them. We had what they call Radio Row, and all the radio stations had a little spot. We were on one part of the fairgrounds there, and I would set up. And it wasn't me. That was the way they set it up for the Town and Country Fair board. We would set up right next to them, okay? And I was on the air live, and they do, because they're a talk station at the top of the hour, they do a 6-minute news block, so it was a break for them. So I'm on the air talking, and it was at the top of the hour, and her daughter, who she called Tonto, I don't know if her daughter was in high school at the time, Tonto and Diane Jones were in a break, and they walked right in front of me, and I said something to the effect, "Oh, and right next to us is Diane Jones and KLPW," and she grabbed the microphone away from me and said, I can't remember exactly what she said. She some derogatory comment, and so you guys don't do blah 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 blah. And at the time, they didn't have a station van, and my station van was parked there, and I said on the air after she handed me back my microphone, I said, "At least we have a station van," and a bunch of people there were laughing because of the fact they didn't have station van.
And the whole stadium erupted in applause.
Well, but see, here we go again. I'm not going to say once again. Okay, I will, in full disclosure, I didn't talk about this. I tried to buy KFNS. KFNS was, and the crazy part of this.
And you saw the headline this morning, right?
I did, and let me say this. The guy selling it was Dave Greene. Dave Greene worked at KFNS, is like the general manager, and he was trying to sell it. And I went back and forth with Dave. Matter of fact, I've got a file on my computer of all the stuff he sent me. I tried to buy KFNS. And the goofy part of this is to give you an idea of how biased banks are against radio broadcast. The transmitter site, I won't mention exact numbers, but the transmitter site is over in Illinois. I don't think have I told you this story, John, off air? Have I told you this story?
Haven't, no.
Okay, the transmitter site in Illinois has 36 acres. It's an old school AM transmitter site, actually right off of 255 in Illinois over there in the Godfrey area. Okay, 36 acres. The county appraisal for just the real estate, not including the towers, not including the building that's over there, the appraisal for the property was $150,000 more than they were asking for the entire radio station. What caught my attention, Dave Greene advertised this on the website, not on the website, on his Facebook page, essentially saying he had a picture of the transmitter site, essentially saying, "Hey, you can buy this property in Illinois and we'll throw in the radio station." Well, not only were they going to throw in the radio station, they're going to throw in about $100,000 worth of studio equipment. They had a lease. They still have a lease on studios in Kirkwood. and they were going to essentially give you the lease. I think there was like another year and a half left on the lease.
What year was this, Brad? What's the time frame here?
Like within the last month.
Oh, okay. And yeah, but before we get off the air, because I want to mention that there's a notable name who was involved in buying it. But go ahead. Please finish this part because I want to hear it.
Okay, I went to a couple bankers, and they scoffed at me like, well, this is a terrible deal. And I go, the real estate is worth more than what the whole the real estate's worth more than what it was worth, over $100,000 more than what the entire operation, including the FCC license, all the equipment, everything. And the bizarre part of this is, and this is how biased bankers are against radio stations, let's say I was rich and I could have I'll just buy the thing, I'll just write a check. And if I would have gone over and gotten a bulldozer and torn down the towers and gone back to the bank and saying, okay, I got 36 acres over in Illinois, there's nothing on it, it's barren ground, and you know what, it'd be great for a subdivision, they'd probably, oh, what do you want for that? How much can we lend you? Because of the fact it's not a radio station anymore. So that's the problem, broadcasters. And see, this is the discussion I had with John Beck, and quite honestly, nothing against you, John Beck. I think you're a wonderful guy. You could care less about what I was talking about.
No, he couldn't care less.
He couldn't care less because of the fact that my whole thing was there are radio stations all over the country, right here in the St. Louis area. Matter of fact, we talked about this, last month, about Cumulus turning off, just literally flipping the switches on 2 stations in Jefferson City. And one of the stations, if you know your history, John, maybe you might know this from your early days involved in politics, KLIK, which is the station in Columbia, or Jefferson City, which was
Moberly. The big... Wasn't it like Moberly, something like that?
No. KLIK is in Jefferson City.
Okay.
KLIK at one point in time had a 40 share in Jefferson City. It was a talk station. And if you were anybody, if you were any kind of a politician, you would be on KLIK. They're going to turn the station off the air and probably turn the license back into the FCC. I said to John Beck, what we need to do is, with the Missouri Broadcasters Association, and get a bunch of people together, put money into a pot and say, okay, if there's a distressed property that somebody's literally going to sell for real estate value, and return the FCC license back to the FCC, and the FCC is never going to reissue the AM license. They've said that. They're never going to reissue these AM licenses. It's not, and perfect example is the Bob Romanek stations, 4 stations in the St. Louis area, that when he got in trouble with the FCC, they took his licenses away from him, gone. Matter of fact, I think I told the story of a couple months ago, the guy who bought one of the transmitter sites was selling the towers for scrap. We're talking about $1 million installation. It cost them $1 million to build that transmitter site. This guy tore the towers down. He's selling them for scrap. Okay? How sad is this? But John just looked at me, yeah, Brad, great idea, and he never did anything with it. So what's happened is David Greene, some guy from Alabama, is that the name?
I don't know. Take a look at your phone, Brad.
Okay, hold it. What did you send me? The name?
I sent a picture of myself with the new owner of KFNS.
No, you did not. Who is that?
Yeah, it's a gentleman named, to your point, Brad, it's a gentleman named Conrad Thompson from Alabama. And
That's
the picture
right.
I sent you is me with Conrad Thompson with former WCW wrestling legend Tony Schiavone, the voice of our child.
How do you know Conrad Thompson?
Oh, you know, Brad. I know people here. I don't know Conrad Thompson. I got my picture taken with him. Conrad Thompson is a mortgage broker in Alabama who this is a fantastic story, and I'll summarize it quickly. He saw that you could essentially pay a fee to have celebrities come over and hang out, right? So he did it. He's a huge wrestling fan. And he ended up having some people come over for entertainment. You know, he's a big mortgage guy down there. And he had some people come in, wrestling celebrities come in and do a little wrestling nostalgia thing. Long story short, he started hosting some podcasts. He is generally considered the best podcaster in all of professional wrestling world. And if you don't consider him the best, you at least consider him the pioneer. And he built a network of podcasts where he was essentially struggling to keep up he has a huge mortgage company apparently in Alabama. And the podcast got so successful that he had to hire a ton of people to run the podcast, or else he would have to give up the mortgage thing. So, Brad, I didn't know that he was involved in this KFNS thing till I opened it this morning. And the great Dan Caesar, who, as we know, interviewed you one time for crap, but Dan Caesar just refers to him as an Alabama colleague. I don't know if anybody's smartened up the great Dan Caesar to the fact that Conrad Thompson is a legend in the last, we'll call it 8 years in the pro wrestling world.
I have Dan Caesar's email address. You want me to pass along to you? Can send that to him?
No, I don't. Dan, somebody else can smarten Dan. I don't need to interact with Dan.
Okay. And John, I'm not trying. Look, I'm at the end. You got like another minute. We got another more minute.
Yeah, sure. We can do another minute.
Okay. I'm not trying to say, Brad, what a great guy you are. You're really trying to help people out. Last night, after I read the article about David Greene and his cohorts, I didn't read the article. It was on Facebook. It was a Facebook post, and he talked about they're going to do this, and they're going to bring in Randy Carricker and things like that. It's not going to be all sports. It's going to be, and it's interesting because the Conrad Thompson thing, now that gives me more texture to the story because of the fact that they're going to do some interesting talk stuff. At 7:09 last night, I texted David Greene, saw the FB post today. Congrats. Can you send me a 15 to 30 second promo and I will run it on my stations? Also, interested in using the BJ show? ? See, John? See what I'm doing for us?
Wow, pretty exciting, Brad.
Because he says he's looking for local content, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, we could package up,
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty exciting, Brad. Way to go. We
do a show every day. I'm thinking to myself, I mean, come on, if you're looking for local content, we could, every day I chop the show up. I could put it into an hour show package for him, send it over to him. They could use it, for a morning drive or something like that. I don't know.
Love it, Brad. I love that. That's a great idea,
But
Brad.
see, and I will give credit to David Greene. David Greene is a guy like me. He has a passion for this business. And the sad part of it is, over the past month when I was interacting back and forth with him to try to buy KFNS, you could tell he was not happy about the fact that there's a chance that a real estate investor is going to come along and say, oh, wow, I could build a new subdivision over there. I could call it Radio Acres, and we could subdivide their 36 acres into 100 different homes and a condo and a walking park and a dog park. Oh, take down those nasty towers with those blinking red lights. We don't want that. And you could hear it in his voice that he was trying. And at one point in time, when I first contacted him, I took this as a compliment. He said, this station is meant for you, Brad. He said that. And
wow,
I
tried awesome.
I tried my best, and I didn't even tell you about this, John. Did I ever mention it once to you?
You mentioned that you were trying to buy a radio station. You mentioned that on the air, but not to me privately.
Okay. And the idea being that the crazy part of this is KFNS has a full market signal, and sometimes, unfortunately, on the bigger scale of broadcasting, my stations, KSLQ and Westplex 107.1 and Crap, do not rate as like, oh my God, they're important stations because we don't have a full St. Louis market signal. But the crazy part of it is that with Westplex 107.1, the transmitters right there, Brian and Feisey, within our city grade signal, we have 300,000 people that are in the city grade signal. If you go out into the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Kansas, and you have a city that has 300,000 people, and you have a radio station that has a 300,000 population coverage, it's worth millions of dollars. But
I hear you.
But people say, well, he's in St. Charles County, and we get the people going, well, it's in St. Charles County. He doesn't have a signal into the city of St. Louis. Okay.
Brad, who won that school board election as we wrap up?
Jeremy Way from
and
West.
ECC went down, correct?
Yes, John. Thank you.
There you go, Brad. Thank you. This message is for Dan Greene. Shout out to Conrad Thompson. Brad, I can't wait to talk to you tomorrow morning.
Why is that? It's David Greene, not Dan Greene.
Because it's 8:03. That's why, Brad.
It's 8:04, John. Okay, say goodbye, John.
See you guys tomorrow.